News from across the Federation, spanning the region and covering the globe. This is the KyssFM SKN News Now Evening Edition, your one true source for news. And now your presenter.
Today is Monday, 27th February 2017. I'm Ebony Brandon. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. In the headlines this evening nationally, official police statistics show a significant surge in crime in 2016. Regionally, a Barbadian economist predicts that the Barbados Central Bank will continue to print more money as a short-term solution to the country's economic woes. And internationally, Indonesia and Australia have restored full military relations following a breakdown in communication. We've got the details of these stories and more straight ahead. Last Friday, the Public Relations Unit of the Royal St. Christopher Nevis Police Force released the long-awaited 2016 crime statistics, as well as the comparative statistics for the years 2014, 2015, and 2016. These statistics show that since 2014, the level of criminal activity in 4 related categories has dramatically increased, potentially as a reaction to the noted economic slowdown in St. Kitts and Nevis. Larceny is defined as the unlawful taking of personal property with intent to deprive the rightful owner of it permanently. In 2014, there were 244 larcenies. The year 2015 saw this number dropping to 215, a 11.9% decrease. In 2016, however, the total number of larcenies rose to 390, indicating a whopping 81.4% increase over the previous year and a 59.8% increase over the year 2014. Breaking is defined as the act or crime of illegally entering a house, building, etc., especially by force. In 2014, the police recorded 284 break-ins. In 2015, the number decreased to 242. The year 2016 ended with 415 being recorded, a 71.5% increase over the previous year and a 46.1% increase over the year 2014. Under the category malicious damage, arson, the following statistics were recorded. In 2014, there were 125 reported incidents. In 2015, 86. In 2016, there were a reported 167 cases, indicating a 94.2% increase over the previous year and a 33.6% increase over the year 2014. In the drug possession, trafficking, importation category, 230 offences were recorded in 2014. In 2015, there was a decrease to 204. In 2006, the number reached 275, an increase of 34.8% over the previous year and an increase of 19.5% over the year 2014. The Federation recorded an economic growth rate of 6.1% in 2014. In 2015, this fell by nearly 2 percentage points, landing at 4.88%. Last year, 2016, the growth rate was estimated by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank at 2.84%. The significant statistical increases in the 3 theft-related criminal categories, in conjunction with the increase in the importation and sale of illegal substances, strongly suggests that the Federation's economic decline has directly contributed to the steady rise in criminal activity. Meanwhile, St. Kitts and Nevis' Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, has maintained his silence on the newly expanded Donald Trump immigration policy, mandating deportation of undocumented immigrants from the United States. While the new policy has only impacted a small number of Caribbean nationals so far, its potential to impact tens of thousands of people with Caribbean roots still exists. Dr. Harris, who invited former Republican Party Chairman Michael Steele to be guest speaker at his New Year's Gala in January this year, has not stated his government's position on the issue despite holding several town hall meetings, a radio interview and a session of the St. Kitts Nevis National Assembly since the announcement. President Trump said that U.S. federal immigration law both imposes the responsibility and provides the means for the federal government in cooperation with states to secure the nation's borders. Trump has said that the purpose of the order, revised and captioned Border Security and Immigration Enforcement Improvements, is to, quote, direct executive departments and agencies to deploy all lawful means to secure the nation's southern border with Mexico, to prevent further illegal immigration into the United States, and to repatriate illegal aliens swiftly, consistently, and humanely, end quote. The U.S. President continued that the order includes returning Caribbean and other immigrants to their respective countries pending formal proceedings. The order also directs the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security to hire an additional 5,000 border agents and to empower state and local law enforcement to support federal enforcement of the immigration law to the maximum extent permitted by law and to ensure that prosecution guidelines place a high priority on crimes. Last Friday, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency released a list detailing the offenses of 680 immigrants who were recently detained and slated for deportation, adding that 75% had criminal convictions. Fear over the announcement has swept across densely populated Caribbean communities in the U.S., including places like Brooklyn, New York, where rumors of immigration sting operations at popular department stores, hospitals, and other establishments frequented by Caribbean nationals spread like wildfire last week, prompting the intervention of a Caribbean American legislator, Jermaine Williams, who is the son of Grenadian immigrants. Last weekend, CARICOM leaders who attended the Guyana Heads of Government meeting, at which neither Prime Minister Harris nor a single representative of the Federation was present, expressed concern that Trump's immigration policies could further result in a reduction of travel to the Caribbean region. Former Dean of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, Dr. Kelvin Daly, has declared that Nevis's Deputy Premier, Honorable Mark Brantley, lies for no good reason. Dr. Daly was referring to Mr. Brantley's recent interview with a local media house, in which he reported that Nevis's employment figures show more people are employed on the island than at any time in the last 12 years. According to Deputy Premier Brantley, Social Security statistics showed that some 5,590 persons on the island of Nevis are actively employed. According to Dr. Daly, however, the decrease in the Federation's gross domestic product, or GDP, as reported by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, paints a far different picture of the situation.
When you have a drop in your GDP, as projected by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, from 6 all the way down to 2.84, that may seem minuscule on its surface, because you say, oh, well, it's only a few percentage points. But those few percentage points adds up to tens of millions of dollars lost from the bottom line of companies operating in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. That is real loss. Absolute real loss. That's loss to businesses. Right? What that means, if you extrapolate further, it means that there's so much less money in the economy. If there's so much less money in the economy, it means demand for goods and services will also decrease. If there's a demand for goods and services decreasing, it also means employment will also drop. And if you look at the Social Security levy projected for 2016, you indeed see a drop in the collections.
The former permanent secretary went on to specifically challenge Mr. Brantley's assertion that there had been an unprecedented increase in employment in Nevis under the leadership of the Concerned Citizens Movement.
I was just privy to a text that the Honorable Mark Brantley sent out, saying that there's a growth. There's a growth in jobs in the economy. Let me read it to you, because you may think I'm joking. I want to read a little bit to you. He says, Jobs are up under CCM. Employment from official Social Security numbers show a high of 5,560 jobs in last year of CCM leadership in 2005. 2005. Fell to a low of 4,321 by 2010 on the NRP, a loss of 1,239 jobs, and by 2012 stood at 4,874 jobs, a loss of over 686 jobs, or 12.34%. Now, Mr. Brantley is claiming that in 2013, when they took over, instantaneously, there was a rebound. Instantaneously. Now, they took over in January of 2013, and instantly, they went from 4,993 all the way up to 5,590 jobs for and going forward to 2016. And he's claiming it is the highest ever in the history of Nevis. According to Mr. Brantley, this reflects some 716 new jobs in 4 years on the CCM, an increase of 14.7%. This man lies for no good reason. Where are those jobs? Where are the jobs? If you have the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, if you have the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank telling you, but the numbers they have posted for 2016 have been downgraded. The GDP has been downgraded by a paltry 2.84%. From 7%. And you're telling us that in a recession that you have managed as a CCM leader to increase jobs at the level you say you have increased them. Well, Mr. Brantley, GDP works. It's a good thing GDP doesn't lie about itself. Because reflected in GDP must be the total value, money value of goods and service produced in the economy. That means your numbers going up in terms of employment, but GDP going down. How is that possible? How is it possible, Mr. Brantley, that the Social Security levy, which is a reflection of the strength of the economy in terms of employment, that number is down? How is it possible? What kind of voodoo economics you're working on us here?
This is Dr. Kelvin Daly. The Malton Moving Conference Room at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has been confirmed as the venue for the launch of the Sir Robert L. Bradshaw Institute of Governance, Politics and Industrial Relations. A communiqué from the Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw Centennial Committee has disclosed that the event will begin at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, 2nd March. Last week at a St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party Town Hall meeting in St. Peters, it was announced that the guest speaker at the launch will be Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez. The launch of the institute is part of the activities to mark the centenary of Sir Robert Bradshaw's birth. The Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw was born on 16th September 1916 and served in many capacities, including Chief Minister and Premier of St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla, as a legislator and trade unionist. He also served as Minister of Trade and Production for St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla in 1956 and as Minister of Finance in the short-lived West Indies Federation from 1958 to 1962. He was then elected to the Federal House of Representatives. Sir Robert died on 23rd May 1978. Team Nevis came away the winner of the Leeward Islands debate competition on Sunday night at the Nevis Performing Arts Centre. This is the 8th time in Nevis's LIDC debating history they've taken away the title. The team also took home the Best Speaker Award in their final debate against former champions Team Antigua and Barbuda. Nevis's Gabriella Brantley and Raul J. Williams proposed the moot. The atrocity of our age is the billions of dollars spent on sports, and amassed a total of 578 points with their presentation. Each of Team Nevis's speakers received Best Speaker Awards, Raul J. Williams for Night 2, Kajal Smithen for Night 3, and Gabriella Brantley for Night 4. First-time debater Kajal Smithen also won the overall Best Speaker Award. Other members of Team Nevis were Rakila Hanley and Makibu Tross, as well as Jahil Linton. Team Antigua and Barbuda secured the runner-up position, having amassed a total of 489 points. Team Anguilla was eliminated on Saturday night, having lost to Team Nevis. However, the team's Shakila Kati was presented with the Best Speaker Award for her performance on night 2. Khalifa Pension was awarded Best Speaker on nights 1 and 3, giving Team St. Kitts 2 additional trophies. St. Martin's Dawood Chapman also received a Best Speaker Award for Night 1, despite his team having been eliminated in their first encounter. The Leeward Islands debating competition began in 1972 and has been won 10 times by Team St. Kitts and 8 times by a team from Nevis. Still to come in regional developments this evening, the governor of the Bahamas Central Bank says the Bahamian dollar remains strong and secure. We've got the details in just a moment. To deal with the country's economic woes, the Central Bank of Barbados has for some time now simply been printing more money as what is considered a short-term solution to a long-term problem. It is a practice which cannot continue without consequence, and according to the economic advisor to the Barbados Labour Party, Dr. Clyde Maskell, is a practice which he says will not end anytime soon.
Economic advisor to the opposition Barbados Labour Party, Dr. Clyde Maskell, says he does not believe the printing of money by the central bank will end with the departure of former Governor Dr. Delisle Worrell. Dr. Worrell was fired from the post last week after going to the courts to prevent Finance Minister Chris Sinclair from sacking him. At a meeting of the BLP's St. Philip South branch last night, Maskell accused Dr. Worrell of betraying his economic principles in favour of the government.
So this man is no fool. In fact, this man was ingenious in keeping this government alive. And as a consequence of that, he suffered. He suffered because he became the scapegoat. But the reason why there has to be and will always be a link between the printing of money and reserves is because it is money that you're not getting from any productive source. And we liken it in Barbados to helicopter, not in our profession, not Barbados, to helicopter money. It's like just free money, somebody go over Barbados then. Imagine it. And from a helicopter, just simply dropping money. And you in work for it, and you picking it up. And you picking it up and spending it. Now, given that it has not been used to produce anything, the implications then will be even greater for the import bill. Because you didn't even drive a stroke, or help a tourist, or sold a piece of ware, or dig a well to get it.
In the North Bahamas, they're singing a different tune. Governor of the Bahamas Central Bank says the Bahamian dollar remains strong and there's no need for concern as the bank's reserves are secure. Governor John Roll made the disclosure during the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce's State of the Economy report presentation when he dispelled rumors that the Bahamian dollar was at risk of devaluation.
One of the things that the central bank has always done is monitor the level of the reserves on a monthly and annual basis relative to the amount of imports that are coming into the country, as well as relative to the size of the central bank's own balance sheet. And as long as the reserves continue within a comfortable level, the central bank allows the average Bahamian certain flexibilities in terms of how easy it is for them to borrow from commercial banks. So we typically focus on how we can manage private sector credit in order to manage the amount of foreign exchange that are flowing through the economy and how much of those foreign exchange end up in the reserves.
Thousands of Brazilians have kicked off their celebrations in Rio de Janeiro for the annual carnival. Brazil's economic crisis is forcing samba schools to compete for funding, however, for costumes and floats. And this year, many are using the 5-day festival to mix politics with the celebrations. Teresa Bo reports from Rio.
Sonia de Souza spends all year looking forward to Carnival in Rio de Janeiro. She lives in the City of God neighborhood, where poverty and violence are part of her everyday life. Sonia dances in 6 samba schools. That's why she says that the carnival is her time to shine.
With this costume, I feel like the Virgin, because this is what I'm going to represent in the parade. For me, it's my time to feel special, to leave the pots and pans and dance. When I put my costume on, I feel like an artist. I feel like a queen.
The carnival in Rio has samba schools in the city, competing to be the best. It's about tradition, honor, and increasingly funding.
People from the different communities in Rio that are part of a samba school spend months preparing for this event. They work on these carriages and on their customs. But in the last years, many have been struggling with funding because of the economic crisis Brazil is facing today.
Many people here are worried about what's coming next. That's why many of those taking part in the blocos, which are carnival street groups, decided to combine politics with their celebrations.
Everybody was complaining and banging pots when Dilma Rousseff was president. Now that President Temer was cited 43 times in corruption testimonies, the pots are silent. Look at what's happening now. Everything is getting worse.
Luis Antonio Sima says that difficult economic times are forcing people to be more creative.
I think the crisis will turn out to be positive for the samba schools because it demands they look for solutions which are much more original than the ones brought by sponsorship funding. In the past, it was easier to get private sponsors. You can see that the costumes can be made cheaper.
But Sonia does not want to think about politics or the economy. For her, Carnival is all about dancing and leaving her worries behind. Teresa Bo.
Still to come in international developments this evening, the world's oldest elected leader, 93-year-old Robert Mugabe, says he has no plans to step down as Zimbabwe's president. Indonesia and Australia have restored full military relations weeks after Jakarta suspended cooperation because of insulting teaching material found at an Australian Army centre. Andrew Thomas reports from Sydney.
Indonesia suspended full military cooperation with Australia after some Indonesian officers at a military base in Western Australia saw some training material they felt mocked their country. So this trip was all about setting the relationship straight, getting it back on track. And on that score, the two leaders announced that full military cooperation was being restored. They also announced an aspiration towards much closer economic ties.
We are both committed to concluding a high-quality bilateral free trade agreement, the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership, by the end of this year.
Malcolm Turnbull announced Australia would set up a second diplomatic post in Indonesia's second biggest city, Surabaya, to try and expand trade. The two leaders also reaffirmed their commitment to freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. That, of course, in response to growing Chinese assertiveness there. And they talked a lot about countering violent extremism, in their words. Money, $30 million, towards strengthening Indonesia's security architecture to stop Indonesians from coming back from Iraq and Syria as people who could pose a threat in Indonesia or being radicalised by the so-called Islamic State. Both leaders are aware that more than 1 million trips are made by Australians to Indonesia on holiday every year, and they want those people to feel safe.
The administration of United States President Donald Trump wants to tackle illegal migration and has focused efforts on those coming through the border with Mexico. But there are many groups who enter the country illegally and unnoticed. Gerald Tan reports.
Mention U.S. immigration, and most people think of the U.S.-Mexico border. But the faces of this debate are changing. More than 11 million migrants in the United States are undocumented, which is to say they're in the country illegally. At nearly 6 million, Mexicans single-handedly represent the largest group. Next are those from Central America at 1.7 million, perhaps explaining why Latinos are often the target of anti-immigration backlash. Yet there's a frequently overlooked demographic here. Asian migrants, mostly from India, China, Vietnam and South Korea, together about 1.5 million. Although it may seem proportionally small, what's interesting here is the overall trend. Since 2000, the number of undocumented migrants from Mexico has risen by 29%, from 4.8 to 5.8 million. That's according to the US-based Migration Policy Institute, which tracks these figures. In contrast, those from Asia saw a threefold jump, from about 500,000 to nearly 1.5 million. They're now the fastest growing group of undocumented workers in the United States. And India accounts for the biggest leap, quadrupling from 70,000 to more than 284,000. Now, most Asian workers arrive by plane legally and then overstay their visa, so building a wall is unlikely to stem that flow.
The world's oldest elected leader, Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe, says he has no plans to step down. His country is in the midst of an economic crisis, but that didn't stop tens of thousands of dollars being spent on his 93rd birthday celebrations. Haru Mutasa reports from Motobo.
In 2015, President Mugabe's wife Grace said her husband would rule Zimbabwe for a long time, even if she has to push him in a wheelchair. Last week, she told supporters he will be president until he dies. But if that happens before next year's elections, she says his name should still be on the ballot. The world's oldest elected leader is 93 years old. He says he's not stepping down anytime soon.
It's a mission which has to do with the interests, the needs, the demands of those who have given you the position, elected.
Officials in the ruling ZANU-PF party say hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on the president's birthday, but critics say the money should have been used for other priorities. Zimbabwe's economy is in crisis. The government is running out of cash and struggles to pay salaries on time. Doctors at state-run hospitals have been on strike for more than a week. The few doctors still working are only dealing with emergency cases. The situation is so bad, soldiers are helping to treat some patients. Essential drugs can no longer be found in some public health facilities. Patients are being turned away because of shortages.
The poor are struggling. We don't know what we're going to do. The private hospitals want us to pay before they help us, but I don't have a job. No one is helping me.
Mugabe's ruling ZANU-PF party is also in a crisis. As he gets older, different factions are maneuvering to take over when he can no longer lead. Political analysts say Grace Mugabe, who leads the party's Women's League, is gaining more power and influence.
If they hold a Congress and she ascends to a specific position, but only by way of appointment by, again, her own husband to the position of Vice President, which connotes with immediacy the position of Vice President of the country, can she succeed?
Mugabe has ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years. He says he's not grooming a successor. Despite anger from some at the state of the economy and corruption in government, he is popular in the rural areas. In an interview on state TV a few days ago, the 93-year-old said he can't step down because so many of his supporters would be disappointed.
And now for a recap of our headlines this evening nationally. Official police statistics show a significant surge in crime in 2016. Regionally, a Barbadian economist has predicted that the Barbados Central Bank will continue to print more money as a short-term solution to its long-term problems. And internationally, Indonesia and Australia have restored full military relations following a communication breakdown. Stay with us. Still to come this evening, Sports Zone. Tonight in Sports Zone, our top stories: 3 West Indian cricketers have received honours at the ESPN Crick Info Awards. Stay with us, we'll tell you exactly who they are in just a moment. All-rounder Carlos Brathwaite was among 3 West Indian players to grab honours at the 2016 ESPN Cricinfo Awards. We get a complete roundup of the outcome of the awards in this report from Vinod Nawani.
Do you remember the name Carlos Brathwaite? Well, the West Indian all-rounders innings in the men's World T20 finals last year was voted as the best T20 batting performance of 2016 at the Cricinfo Awards. Brathwaite hit 4 consecutive sixes in the final over, bowled by England's Ben Stokes in Kolkata. That gave the West Indies men their second World T20 title. Another West Indian, Hayley Matthews, is also in the limelight. Her batting in the women's World T20 finals was also voted the best T20 batting performance of 2016. 18-year-old Matthews made her maiden T20 international half-century, scoring 66 against Australia, also in Kolkata, which is the highest score in a women's World T20 final. New Zealand off-spinner Leigh Kasparek won the women's T20 bowling award for figures of 3 for 13 in a World T20 group game against Australia. The men's T20 international bowling award went to Bangladesh's Mustafizur Rahman, who took 5 for 22 against New Zealand in their World T20 game in Kolkata. South Africa's Quinton de Kock's knock of 178, which kick-started South Africa's 5-0 whitewash against Australia, was named the ODI batting performance of the year. The ODI bowling performance of 2016 went to a West Indian. Sunil Narine had figures of 6 for 27 against South Africa in a tri-series in the Caribbean. The Debutant of the Year award went to a Bangladeshi bowler, Mehdi Hassan, who took a record 19 wickets from 2 test matches in his debut series against England. Ben Stokes won the Test Batting Award for his 198-ball score of 258 in Cape Town against South Africa. It was the second fastest Test double hundred. England pacer Stuart Broad won the Test Bowling Award for a second year running. Broad grabbed a match-winning 6 for 17 against South Africa in Johannesburg. And Virat Kohli was named Captain of the Year for India's unbeaten run in Test matches in 2016. Out of 12 tests last year, India won 9 and drew 3.
A 17-year-old transgender teen in the United States has sparked controversy over his involvement in a girls' wrestling tournament. The teen, who is transitioning from female to male, is required to compete against girls because of a policy from the Texas governing body for athletics, which requires students to compete against the gender listed on their birth certificates. The debate has deepened even further as the teen, who's been undefeated all season, is being accused of having an unfair advantage as a result of the testosterone he takes as part of the transition process.
Mac Beggs looks like many anxious, brooding teenage boys, fidgeting and trying to focus. The undefeated wrestler is getting into competition mode before the Texas State High School tournament in Houston in the girls' 110-pound weight class. The 17-year-old was born female but is transitioning to male with the aid of testosterone therapy. Beggs told a Dallas newspaper he'd compete against boys if he could, but state rules won't allow it. The Dallas area teen won his first match on Friday against Taylor Latham. Latham's mother says she empathizes with Beggs, but
it's not fair for that individual that wants to transition and wrestle boys. And it's not fair for the female wrestlers for this unfair advantage.
Beggs competes against girls because the state policy for athletics requires students to wrestle against the gender listed on their birth certificate.
We believe having those separate divisions has led to the overwhelming success of the sport in our state and the high volume of participation in our state as compared to others.
Texas is one of a handful of states that has separate boys and girls wrestling competitions and has thousands thousands of participants. As for the hormone use, the state policy allows Beggs to compete because he's changing genders under the care of a doctor. In a previous tournament, 2 of Beggs' opponents forfeited rather than fight. This man says if his daughter faced the transgendered teen, she'd compete.
No, she's never backed down from a wrestling match, and she's not going to start today.
Beggs is suddenly in the limelight, caught in the whirlwind of a fiercely political issue, and is unsurprisingly shy of the national media attention and cameras trained on his every movement.
It doesn't really bother me if, like, a girl's in the boys' bracket or something, so...
I don't know. I've never heard of an athlete being allowed to use enhancements of any kind, so I was shocked.
And if she thinks that she is capable to compete with the boys, then she should be able to compete with the boys.
A victorious Beggs and his grandmother slipped out of the arena before reporters could catch up. He told us he'll talk after the tournament is over.
Zambia prepared to host the Africa Under-20 Cup of Nations, its biggest ever sporting event. For a country with a rich footballing history, it's an opportunity that's been a long time in coming. Andy Richardson filed this report from the capital, Lukasa.
A group of Zambian footballers getting ready to make history. They're about to become the first ever Zambians to play a continental event on home soil. The Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations is a chance for the country to show it's a capable host and for this team to prove they belong among the continent's best.
It's nice to host this tournament, and for sure, yes, it will be our first big tournament to be played in this country. I can assure the nation we prepared very well for this tournament. We work hard so that at least we go far in this tournament.
Zambia had been due to host the 1988 Africa Cup of Nations, but had to pull out due to a lack of funding, and all subsequent bids to host that event have been rejected. Then in 2011, they won the rights to stage the All Africa Games, but again had to pull out due to a lack of cash. Now finally, a major continental event has arrived in the country. Zambia has no shortage of footballing talent. Twice before, the country has reached the Under-20 World Cup, and in 2012, Zambia won the Senior Cup of Nations. Ticket prices for this tournament have been kept low, $1 for the cheapest seat, in the hope as many young players and fans as possible can attend. A former head of the Zambian Football Association told me this is a day he thought would never come.
I'm glad I'm still living. One kept wondering, when are we ever going to do something like this? So this is a very important time. In fact, I would liken it to the eclipse of the moon. You don't know when it will be here next.
Zambia's famous team of the 1990s is also being remembered at this time. Acknowledged as the best generation of players Zambia ever produced, in 1993 the entire squad was killed in a plane crash. Daniel Chumba is the brother of one of the players who died. He's committed his life to supporting youth football in Zambia.
There is time to mourn, and the time to celebrate, and the time to laugh. So for me, I think we have mourned too much. We have just to celebrate these heroes. So I'm urging the Under-20 to put up the fight so that people, they can be happy instead of start remembering some years back. Yeah.
This team and this tournament, all part of Zambian football's ongoing effort to prove it does have a future and not just a past.
Meanwhile, Zambia's football fans have finally had a chance to see their country play in a big event on home soil. The South African nation is celebrating as their team started the tournament in the best possible way, with a win.
A day that's been more than 50 years in the making. A day that's been more than 50 years in the making. Independence came to Zambia in 1964, but it's taken until now for the country to host a continental sporting event. The home team playing Guinea on day one of the Africa Under-20 Cup of Nations.
I'm very happy, actually. It's a privilege, once in a lifetime, to have such an event.
We're so optimistic that after this, we will definitely host the Senior Africa Cup of Nations here in Zambia.
We may also someday host or co-host the World Cup. So it gives us that pride. Yeah, you look surprised, but it's something that we hope. I mean, if you have faith, I always say faith and fear don't stay in one mind.
The National Heroes Stadium in Lusaka is the focal point of this tournament. It was built thanks to a loan from China, as was the other stadium being used for this event. Now, that in itself is not unusual for sporting infrastructure in Africa, but it once again does raise the question as to whether or not spending big money on a football tournament still seems like a good idea when the fans and the teams have gone home.
This professor of economics told me the tournament will provide Zambia with a unique marketing opportunity.
The country must be known. And when you have a sport like this, it allows you to market yourself, to sell yourself, to show off. And an event like this allows people to start zeroing in and zooming in this part of the world. And that is really important, because unless you are known out there by those that want to do business with you, nobody will come.
In the short term, Zambia's fans are getting the priceless chance to see many of Africa's best young players, and their team started out with a 1-0 win over Guinea.
We're going the whole way. The whole way. This is our tournament. And we have our people behind us, so there's no chance anyone's beating us.
I hope they'll maintain this team, at least to make them play more international games so that they get exposed, so that in the future we have a good team, because this is a good team that we are.
Zambia's footballers have moved a step closer to more international football. The top 4 teams from the event will go to the Under-20 World Cup in South Korea.
And that wraps up this evening's edition of SKN News Now. On behalf of the entire team here at KyssFM, I'm Ebony Brandon, wishing you a very pleasant evening. Do remember tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. to tune in for another edition of Ask the Leader. And coming up next this evening, DJ Artie is in with you until 10 p.m. Good night.